Okay. So we should be recording now, and I've gotten your permission to record it and post it for those that can't be here. And I know that they'll greatly appreciate that. I did want to start off with just thanking you for all that you do and all the breadth of knowledge that all of you bring. The only way that a small university like Pacific can offer what we do to our students and that breadth of knowledge is through really high quality adjuncts who know their stuff. So I know we're very, very lucky to have all of you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So what is the edTPA? I'll give you kind of like the big overview from my perspective about the edTPA versus the work sample to just give you something to hang your hat on. So we used to do a work sample, which was 10 lessons. It was a unit and they had to do 10 lessons. That work sample was locally scored. Some of you may have even helped score some work samples at some point in time. I know my husband's a teacher. He has his work sample binder, to this day. So that used to be kind of the capstone experience. TSPC has now mandated that instead of that we do something called the edTPA. And the big difference is between the edTPA and the old work sample is that instead of being locally scored, it's administered through Pearson. And so students will upload all their materials to Pearson and scorers across the nation will score it. That, of course, also comes with a cost. So it's $300 for them to participate versus when we used to do it for them. That was, of course, just part of the tuition that they paid. So that's one difference. The other thing is now instead of doing 10 lessons, they do 3 to 5 lessons, but they have to videotape the lessons. They also need to write a lot of commentaries about what is happening in the lessons. So the way the structure of it kind of changed is there used to be more lessons, so 10 lessons. Now it's a 3 to 5 learning segment. And those 3 to 5 lessons do need to be continuous and build upon one another. And with that, they need to have all of these commentaries that talks about what they're doing, why they're doing it. If they have research to back up what they've chosen to do, that's even better. And so that's definitely, as we talk about some areas that you can help, is help them with that research. So that's kind of the big differences. Used to be 10 lessons. Now it's 3 to 5, but there's video, there's artifacts. So for example, when they do a student assessment, they now need to upload samples of those assessments. They have to upload video, they have to upload their commentary as well as the lessons themselves. So there's a smaller number of lessons, but they really dive in deep. So the edTPA, it's a portfolio assessment, and it's all online. It's considered, TSPC classified it as a program completion requirement. So in order to graduate, they have to pass the edTPA. And the reason that they made it a program completion requirement and not a licensure requirement is that way if people move in from out of state and states that do not require the edTPA, they won't have to do it. Currently, right now, at this moment, if you already have a license in one area and you go to add an endorsement, you can either do a work sample or the edTPA, but I think that that's going to shift, and pretty soon everybody's going to be doing the edTPA for adding endorsements and or initial licensure. It'll just be that adding endorsements will be able to be locally scored. So as a faculty, we would be able to score it versus them uploading it. So that's kind of the idea. When you look through the edTPA materials, what you'll see is that nothing that they're being asked to do for the edTPA, it all makes sense. It's all things that There's nothing in there that you go, why would they think of this? It's really based on what successful teachers do. So they engage students in active learning. They create intellectually ambitious tasks. They use a variety of teaching strategies. They assess students' learning as they go along. They create scaffoldings and supports. They provide clear standards. And they have this classroom that they manage effectively. So nothing in the edTPA will be a shock to like, why are they asking that? The edTPA is long. It's quite detailed. It's considered a performance assessment because, again, they have to videotape themselves teaching. They get up to 20 minutes. That can be in 2 different segments depending on the handbooks. And so it's really quite a process. The idea is that by doing the edTPA, they should learn quite a bit. And so it's supposed to be this educative experience for the teacher candidate. So it's not just a summative assessment, but it's supposed to be this educative experience. There are...
Just know that you guys have been...
Sorry, I'm at work.
If you have a question, please just raise your hand and let us know too. So I just paused because I thought, oh, somebody has a question. And I know I'm going quickly because I want to know if we can be done before Sandy has to go, and I want to respect your time. There are 27 different handbooks. Oregon did not adopt the middle childhood handbooks. So if you have students, they'll have to do this that are in middle school, they'll have to do the secondary handbook. So if you've got students that are doing middle school, and really, Jesse, and we looked through the difference between the middle school handbooks and the secondary handbooks, and they weren't that different. So, but you can see that physical education does have its own handbook there. World languages is a little different too, and it's got its own handbook as well. So the idea, of course, is we're trying to raise the bar, rigorous entry into the profession. The benefits to the candidates are that it should be informative to them. It should help them with their professional development agenda. If they can do the edTPA, they can do any teacher evaluation system that their principal sends their way, that is for sure. And it's kind of based off of the national board process. Yep. And here are some things that, again, can be beneficial for students. One of the things that it talked about that people have said is doing the edTPA and having to write out all of those justifications. It did help them for their job interviews, because then when they're asked, what learning theories do you like to base your lessons on, they had just written about it. And so that they found that helpful. There are 3 tasks to the edTPA. They've got their planning tasks, their instruction tasks, and their assessment tasks. So if you hear people talk about task 1, task 2, task 3, task 1 is planning, task 2 is instruction, task 3 is assessment. If you're in elementary ed, you'll also hear about task 4, and that's because elementary education has to do 3 to 5 learning segments for literacy, and then they have to do 1 math reteach, and the math reteach is called task 4. I alluded to earlier that there are 27 different handbooks. The tricky part is that each handbook has slightly different requirements. So if you're talking to somebody, make sure that they are looking at their handbook. You don't want a secondary science teacher talking to a special ed teacher talking to a world languages teacher, because all of their handbooks will have different requirements. So they need to look at their handbook. And sometimes it can, look a little different. So here are the different tasks. We've got task 1, task 2, task 3. So task 1, they talk about the context. They have to have their lesson plans. They have to upload their instructional materials. Like if they're going to use a worksheet, they'll upload the worksheet. They're planning commentary. So again, there are these commentaries, and I'll show you some examples of that. Task 2, they've got their video clips as well as their instructional commentary. And then task 3, they analyze an assessment. They pick 3 focus learners, except for in special ed, where they're going to analyze their work for errors and thinking and those types of things. So that's kind of the general overview of what they'll be doing. Along all of that, so you've got planning, instruction, assessment, as well as analyzing, teaching, and then they've got a segment called academic language. Academic language is not separated in world languages, I believe, because, world languages is all about language. But the other handbooks, they'll have to address the academic language and the language demands of their lessons and what they're doing. Okay, so I'm gonna skip through a few of these. So the edTPA documents are protected, and so we have them on a website, on our Pacific website, and there's a password to download them, and I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a little bit. So they're copyrighted and they're protected because they are considered an assessment, and they should only be shared with those supporting somebody through the edTPA, like you, or somebody who's going through the edTPA. So just so you know that.
So are we allowed, are we allowed to give those to our students then? A
Yes.
copy to the students?
Yeah, so you can give copies to your students, and we're trying to get them, and in fact, I've just been talking to faculty about trying to, even like the first week of class, getting them to download their handbooks and to start looking at them and reviewing them and those types of things. So they should have these, and they should be, making these their best friends and really snuggling up, in front of the fire and reading these handbooks.
So they also have the login information to download it themselves?
They should, yes.
Okay.
But, there's always students that might slip through the cracks or forget where it is. So you can definitely share that with them.
Thank you.
But we're trying to get it out and to more people. This year we're in a pilot year this year, and so 100% of our students need to take it, but Oregon doesn't have a cut score set yet. So we need them to do a good job because it's still going to TSPC, and we are still recommending them for licensure, and we don't want to be recommending people for licensure that absolutely bombed this, so that would be a problem that we need to address. But this year there's no cut score in Oregon. Oregon is going to start setting its cut score in June.
So I have one more question. I have one flex student and 3 regular MAT students. So the MAT students are doing this. Does a flex student also do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Excellent question. I've got a bunch here of slides about the handbook, but I might just download a handbook and show it to you. Right at the beginning of the handbook, they've got these task overviews. So when you download your handbooks like this, it's got the contents. And I think that these task overviews are really helpful to them because it's almost like a checklist. I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. So I think that that's a really good place to direct students to, because it just gives them this overview. Here's task 1, here's what to do, what to submit, and then it links it over here. It's linked to the rubrics for those areas. Okay, and they've got, what do you think about? What do I need to do? What do I need to write? I like to joke that, how in humans, our best qualities are also our worst qualities, right? I mean, I could either be described as being stubborn and obstinate, or I could be described as being tenacious and dedicated, and so and most of the time when people talk about my strengths and my weaknesses, they're actually talking about the same character traits. And I think that's kind of true about the edTPA, in that a fantastic thing about the edTPA is everything is laid out for the students in black and white. Everything. What they need to do, there's no ambiguity about what they need to do. It's all in here. Now, the complex thing about that is, for example, this is the elementary handbook. The elementary handbook is 75 pages. So, of course, the problem with the edTPA is it takes everything, absolutely everything, is written down, and it takes 75 pages. So it's the level of detail I'm going to put as both the strength and a weakness for the edTPA. But the good news is There's no ambiguity. It's all in here. What size font, what fonts, what they need to do, it's all in here. There's a glossary. There are rubrics. So here's, for example, an example of the rubrics. All of the rubrics are from 1 to 5. A 3 is considered a novice teacher who's ready to enter the classroom. So on all of the rubrics, a 3 would be considered a passing score. So you can see here's an example of a rubric, the learning environment. How does it demonstrate a positive learning environment that supports students' engagement in learning? So that's the overall question. And then a level 3 is the candidate demonstrates rapport with and respect for students. And the candidate provides a positive, low-risk social environment that reveals mutual respect among students. And so that's what the raters will be looking for. In general, so you can see that 3 is an early novice teacher practices. From what we've seen, we submitted some last year. We only saw like 1 or 2 5s. So this 5 is not just a home run, but it's like an out of the ballpark home run to get a 5. You know, I think that's apropos since the World Series is starting tonight. I might as well use the baseball metaphor. So really, students are going to be much more in here, but they can definitely look at what it takes to be a 5. We just, you know, that shouldn't be their expectation. You can see in general, 1 means they're not ready, 5 means they're highly accomplished, and there's some dynamics there. So their teaching is really teacher focused. What I'm doing right now would probably get, you know, 1, since I'm not having much interaction among students versus student focused, whole class versus individual groups, fragmented and indiscriminate versus, you know, well executed. And so that's the general rubrics. So if you're doing activities in your classes, if you're having them write lesson plans, for example, you might have them, some things I've done in some of my classes are have them take the rubrics and apply it to different lesson plans that I provided, apply it to lesson plans that they've written. And I find when they have to apply the lesson plans, not the lesson plans, but the rubrics, and they're the ones scoring with the rubrics, it helps them really get to know those rubrics. I've also had them do that with some videos. I found some YouTube videos of some instruction and had them rate those factors. So that's something that you can do. So in terms of the candidates' resources, they should have the edTPA handbooks. There's also this document called Making Good Choices that really walks them through it. A big part of the whole process is the videotape. And so because they're videotaping, they need to get videotape permission. And there's been a big task force on this. It's kind of been decided that the general videotape release that parents sign at the beginning of the school year is not enough, because that general videotape release is not saying to parents and asking parents if it's okay to send a video of their child to Pearson. And you know, potentially being used in some research, although we're having our students mostly check that they're not going to put it in for that. So of course, getting back those video permission forms are kind of the sticky point with a lot of our students. So if you're supervising students or working with students at different points in time, that the video is definitely kind of a little bit of the bugaboo for them. And so we're trying to provide them with these materials. We're trying to provide them with some examples. We're definitely working on that. And so in terms of how you can best support them, there's a few things in terms of what we can and we can't do. So I'm going to kind of start with, here's unacceptable support for, you know, anybody working with them. And it's also important to know that the cooperating teachers really can't be on the video, and that's a big part of it. It really has to be our students, and you can't have the cooperating teacher jump in and say, oh, and doing a redirection or helping out. what segments that they want to do and what lessons they want to do really has to be their choice. All of us can't edit their edTPA drafts. We can ask them probing questions about some of the things that they're doing. But, you know, as educators, if this is their final draft that they're going to be submitting to the edTPA, I know usually I use track changes, I use comment bubbles, but we can't do that because this is their assessment that they're going to be giving. I just put this in here, and I'll send you the a copy of the PowerPoint. But if you're interested in becoming an edTPA scorer, I've got that in there for you. And okay, so here is the website. I did want to just talk briefly a few more things about the video recording. Anything you can do to get them practice video recording in your classes is helpful. We don't want the first time that they're using their technology, or if they're in a field placement and you happen to be working with them while they're in a field placement, have them film themselves. When they do their commentaries, what they're going to have to do is watch their segments of videos over and over again and say, at minute 255, I demonstrated mutual respect for students because I blah, 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 blah. So that's what they're going to eventually be asked to do. And so, you know, anything that we can do to help them get used to that process really helps. They're going to be asked to do the whole assessment portion. And so I know, of course, in your class too, definitely, and I'm sure in the others, you're going to be talking about assessments. How can you create assessments so you can see those errors in thinking are some really helpful things to show them how to do, and create those, you know, rich, you know, really meaty assessments that they'll have a lot to talk about and to look at. Those things can really, really help them as well. In terms of planning, anything, that edTPA does not have a set lesson template for their planning. So we've got some that we've been helping them with, but also if you're sharing your lesson plan templates with them, that can be really helpful. I'm telling them that when they're doing the edTPA, this is not the time to be creative. I repeat, you can be creative in the rest of your life, but not here, from the standpoint of they want to use the rubric language in their lesson plans. If their lesson plans have to address the language demand, have a title that says language demand and then say what it is. So I'm trying to get them to spell it out and make their lesson plans as clear as possible, as aligned to the rubrics as possible. I want to make the job of the reviewers really easy, because they can say, I'm looking for these things. Here are where those things are in the lesson plans. So let me just see if I got them. Anything you can talk about lining instruction to standards. One of the things I've really seen is kind of like this drift. They have the standard that they say they're teaching to, they have an activity, and then they have an assessment, and they're all kind of related about the same topic, but they're not exactly aligned. And so anything you can help them to do with that. They have to talk about how they're going to support differentiation and student-centered instruction. And so, and they'll specifically have to pick some focused learners to address their special needs. So anything you can do to help support that will really be helpful for them. And so, you know, when you're kind of thinking of that, discuss ways to increase student engagement. How do you get multiple perspectives, different points of view? Talk about how data drives instruction, what adaptations, how should they change based on the data that they're getting, and any kind of reflection on instruction or reflection will help them, because one of the things they'll have to do for the edTPA is reflect on what they're doing. Another thing that edTPA asks them to do is to connect the students' interests and backgrounds to instruction, as well as like community assets to instruction. So any suggestions and help that you can do in that way, anytime you can demonstrate how in your teaching that they can take the students' interests, their own students' interests into consideration, that would help them. Anything you can do to provide research for students that then they can cite. So learning theories is one of them, Sue, that they need to have. And so,
I think they get that in ed psych.
Yeah, so they might do that in ed psych. So that's one thing that they need. Yeah. If they're going to differentiate in a special way and they have a citation for that, or if, so if you guys know the leaders, the lead clinicians and the lead researchers in your field and can give them the names that they can cite for, for example, in PE, it's best practice to make sure that all your students are moving as much as possible. I don't know, I'm making stuff up. And then they can cite, as so-and-so said, that, is huge. So any resources that you might have to help them support their commentaries. They can use materials created by other people for their lesson plans. So if their school requires, XYZ reading, they can use XYZ reading and do lesson 52 of XYZ reading because that's what they're on. They can also get materials from you. They can get materials from their cooperating teacher. They just need to cite that they got those materials from those places. And that's a big part of it. I know sometimes people forget to cite. We've had instances across the state where somebody's using something like a Riverside Publishing, materials, and it's so obvious to them that they're using those materials that they don't put it in their citations, and then they get in big trouble. So they definitely need to cite that, whether they got something just off the internet, whether they got something from you, whether they got something from their cooperating teacher. That just really needs to be in there. And again, any lesson planning that you can show them or any examples just really help them. I think one of the big things that I put on here is just providing emotional support for students that are going through this. I think we can normalize it. There always was, we always had a lesson, some kind of capstone. I know all of us who have advanced degrees did some kind of, we can all share some, of our war stories from the capstones that we had to complete. And so again, there always was a work sample. It used to be more lessons. Now it's fewer lessons, but more in depth. And I think that as long as we're positive about the edTPA, I think that they'll really pick up a lot of that for us. Last thing, encouraging the video camera. There's some also really interesting things about the video camera in that they can't show where the school is. Sorry, I'm going back through to make sure I didn't forget anything. They can't have last names on there. So if the students' desks have last names on there, they have to cover it up. They can only call students by their first names. If they don't get permission for a student, that student either has to be off camera or blurred. So there's quite a bit that goes into the video, but they can't give away the location or student last names. Okay, so I know I just threw 102 things at you. Any questions so far? I'm gonna take us to the Pacific page here to show you what that looks like. Okay, and I need to do my other screen. So I'm just copying and pasting this right off of here.
When do they usually take this or complete this? Like, is there a certain time for the year, or like, how does that work?
So we're looking at, and that's actually a point of discussion because we have also had the teacher inquiry project, and different campuses are, and we're still working out when the best time to do it is. There's some discussion, are they ready enough when they do their initial field work, or does it need to be during student teaching? Some of that might depend on the student. The other issue, especially as this becomes consequential next year, is that they'll have to pass it, and it takes a while to get the scores back. And so we'll need for them to be able to submit it, get the scores back, and then if they don't pass, we need to give them time to resubmit.
And this is all before they are allowed to get a job or even get their
Before they can get their diploma.
diploma. Oh,
And so, right, so you can see the magnitude, right, of the edTPA, which is why we are doing things like this training, is that we all need to know about it because it's the thing that's coming up. And the other thing that it's really important that students do their best work the first time, because luckily if they fail one task, so let's say they fail task 2, they only have to resubmit task 2, but they have to, for every task they have to resubmit, they have to pay an extra $100. And so, you know, you want to get it right the first time.
this is the first year they're doing it, though. Like,
what?
This is the first the edTPA is being implemented.
Right.
And okay.
So this is, so they had a little pilot year last year where we had 30% of students submit. This year, 100% of students are submitting. And what the state is doing is collecting all that information from those that have submitted. And that's going to be used to set the cut scores. So starting next year, we'll have cut scores and they'll need to do it. So I just wanted to show you a few things about the website really quickly, as I think that this is key.
Is there a timeline then that we need to know for them to have this in by?
So here's the difficult part, and why that's not an easy question, is the undergrads do their student teaching at a different time than their grads, and Forest Grove starts on a different calendar than Eugene does. So the answer is yes, but the answer also is right now we're not all on the same calendar. So the people who are doing the student teaching right now, their deadline is December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, so hopefully that'll stick for them. But what it'll be in the spring or next year, the special ed cohort in Forest Grove starts at a different time. In essence, right now for this year, they have to have it submitted before they graduate. So chances are, if they're graduating, depending on when the term ends, they're probably submitting at the latest like a month before they're done. And so their window is probably before then. But I can't give you a specific date and time for everybody because all the different programs and all the different campuses are on different schedules.
And so since there's no cut scores, because this is going to be used to develop the cut scores, is that an automatic pass for people then, essentially?
It kind of is. I mean, in some ways we can kind of tell whether they would pass or not because 3s on the rubric are people saying that they're ready. What we don't know is in Oregon, will Oregon let you get a 2 and then a 4 and that'll balance out? Or, you know, will Oregon's cut score eventually be such that you could have 2 2s and the rest 3s? I mean, who knows what it'll exactly look like. We don't want them uploading their grandmother's blueberry recipe because, you know, and saying, oh, look, I submitted something, I'm done. It's still going to TSPC, and then we are saying this candidate is ready to teach. And then if TSPC gets back their scores as all 1s, and we recommended them to graduate as they're ready, then that's not going to look good. So we are trying to get them to really take it seriously, to really read their edTPA handbook closely, to try to practice their lessons before it's the first time that they're doing it, even if they are just doing their lesson in front of their parakeet or their dad or, their little brother or, find somebody, so that the first time you're doing it is not the time that you're teaching. We're trying to get them to be proactive and turn in high quality work for those reasons. But yes, they're not going to not graduate this year necessarily based on, the state saying that. We as a department might get their scores back and say, you might need to redo something for us, but not necessarily for the state.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so really quickly, this site, so to make sure, so here's the home page, and can everybody see this web page?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then from here are all the different handbooks. So for example, if we go to physical education, you'll see here's the handbook. And this is what I've been, and here's where we're going to enter that password that's there. It's also in the email that was sent out to you all. So here it is. Yay, we've got the handbook for physical education. And you can see that we can start looking at, here's the table of contents. Oh, yours is a little shorter. So you're lucky. And then here's the purpose, the overview. This part, once it scrolls down here a moment, talks about how it's structured. And here's that overview of the tasks that I was saying is kind of nice. Here's exactly what they're going to have to submit. Here's what they're going to have to do. So for the planning task, select one class as a focus for this assessment, provide the relative context and information. You need 3 to 5 learning segments, which is like 3 to 5 hours of instruction. So it has it all laid out. Determine the central focus for your learning segment. So it's going to tell them what to do, what they're going to have to submit. So they're going to have a context for learning, their lesson plans, copies of their instructional materials, copies of their assessments, and their commentaries. And I'm going to show you the commentaries in just 1 minute. But it's also nice because then you can link to the rubric. So here's planning to support students with varied needs. When I click on that, it goes right to the rubric. How does the candidate use knowledge of his or her students to target supports for students to develop competencies and knowledge in the psychomotor, cognitive, and/or affective domains? And so 3, plan supports are tied to learning objectives and central focus with attention to characteristics of the whole class. And then to get more and more, they're going to have to show that they're making adaptations for individual students. So that's what the handbooks look like. The other parts that I really wanted to show you, here are the context for learning is where they give background about their school, what grade levels, what are the ethnicities of their students, those types of things. But here are the commentaries. When we talk about the commentaries that we need to do, and this is what they look like. And a lot of students, once they download these and start looking at them, it really takes a lot of the pressure off. They're long. The joke I like to make is that about completing the edTPA is that joke about how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. It's the same thing for the edTPA. If they just take 1 bite at a time and keep going, they'll get there. And so you can see here's task 1, the planning commentary for physical education. No more than 9 single-space pages, including the prompts. So they don't erase anything that's on this page. They just will start filling it in. And so you can see these brackets here. They literally just start typing the answer. So here's 1, central focus. Describe the central focus and purpose of the content you will teach in the learning segment. They click right here once it's downloaded and they just start typing their answer. What is their central focus? Then given their central focus, describe how the standards and learning objectives within your learning segment address the development of student competencies in the psychomotor domain, and at least 1 other learning domain related to movement patterns, performance concepts, or health-enhancing physical activities.
Sandy's got to go.
Okay.
I got to go.
All right, Sandy, I think you got the big part, but please feel free to email or call me if you have any questions.
All right. Thank
Okay,
you so much. Bye.
Bye. And so you can see that they just start responding to this prompt right here. They literally click here and they start responding. If they go over 9 pages, whatever is 9-page or more, just won't be evaluated and won't count for them. So you can see once they download the templates, once they download the handbook and really start getting in there and looking, they should be just fine.
You're talking 9 pages for that entire section, right?
Right, so it's 9 pages for this entire section. So you can see that the prompts themselves, let's see.
There's a lot of pages, okay.
Page 2. So they're already kind of starting out with like 3 pages worth of stuff. And then the prompts stay there and they just write their answers right below.
Okay, so it's not that overwhelming then. Okay, that's good.
It's not, no, I mean, you know, and if you've written a master's thesis or a dissertation, it's not that bad. A lot of students don't have that much practice with academic writing, so any help that we can give them with that academic writing, this is not creative writing. And the other thing I see students kind of having a little bit of difficulty with sometimes is that they have to connect the dots for the reader. The reader is not going to meet them halfway. You can't just say I'm scaffolding. You have to say how you're scaffolding and why you're using that scaffolding. You can't just assume that they know why you used a certain technique or why you're doing what you're doing. And that's definitely something that I saw students doing is they just weren't they weren't connecting all the dots for the reviewer. And the reviewer was having to use their background knowledge to fill it in, which is not going to get them all the points. They have to be able to explain exactly what they're doing and why. And again, I keep saying this is not creative writing. Like, just the facts, ma'am. So that's what it kind of looks like. The other few things that I want to make sure you know about on the webpage, we do have the video permission forms on here. This website is really helpful. The past TPA, it's an external website, but it's a nice link because it has examples. And so when they click on the examples, for example, the planning commentary, the examples, of course, are not on the template since that's copyrighted, but you can see that there are some examples on here and they can kind of get a sense for, this is supposed to be what a 5 would be. And so that's something good to be able to refer your students to. And that's this bookmark right here. Here's the technology equipment checkout. We ordered a bunch of new video cameras just for this to make sure students had access to them. Sometimes, sometimes your phone can be great. And then sometimes the audio or the length of the video that these will capture aren't what is needed. So they can check out video equipment, and we do have that on there. So this website is kind of their go-to place. The edTPA website is more for faculty, the one that the edTPA itself houses. And so this is really where to direct students to. This is where they can get all of the templates that they need and all the handbooks, the video permission forms. The video permission forms have been translated into 5 languages. Those video permission forms are being used statewide, and Portland Public Schools was actually nice enough to translate into 5 additional languages. But of course, German was not one of them, and that was the last language that somebody asked me for. So we don't have all of them, but we do have some of them, and that's here. But really it's the handbook, and there's also the making good choices, which I'll send out to everybody. And once they've read the handbook and they're making good choices, they should be pretty set. And a lot of their questions can be answered by, taking a quick look in the handbook. So is that helpful?
Yeah, very helpful.
Generate any ideas about what you could do in your class, the classes that you teach to help support them in the edTPA?
Mm-hmm.
If you do anything to support the edTPA, if you can be explicit that you're doing that. Again, I know we've used the rubrics and at least pieces from the rubrics sometimes in our assignments. And that's been really helpful. But if you can let them know that, because I think one thing that sometimes happens is students get to the end and all the things they need to do on the edTPA is what we've all been doing all along. And then at the end they'll say, but nobody's helped prepare me for the edTPA. And so if you are doing activities that do align with the edTPA, if you can let them know that, so that then they can feel that support and realize like, oh yeah, I have been giving this support towards the edTPA all along the way.
Okay. So I have endorsement students. They don't have to do the edTPA this year. This is going to be.
Yeah, they'll have to either do the work sample or the edTPA.
Okay.
But yeah, they won't have to submit and pay the $300. We can locally score those. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that's helpful.
Okay.
Any other questions? Comments? Good knocker jokes? Okay. Well, thank you for spending your afternoon with me. I know I threw a lot of information out there. And we'll definitely be touching base about this again. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Okay. Well, we can just email you, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I have my cell phone number at the bottom of my email. And I'm really good with text messages and phone calls and all of that good stuff.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Janelle. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
All right, Janelle.
Pleasure to meet you.
Bye.
You. See ya.
Bye.
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 I don't know how to get out of this thing.